Captain Jake Morrison sat in his command chair aboard the USS Defiance, watching the stars drift past on the main screen. The exploration ship was 3 days into what should have been a routine survey mission in the Kepler sector. Morrison was a tall man with gray hair and sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. He had spent 15 years in space, and his gut told him something was wrong. "Captain, we're picking up some strange readings ahead," said Lisa Brooks from the navigation station. She was young, maybe 25, with short brown hair and quick fingers that danced across her control panel. Lisa had been with the Defiance for 2 years and was one of the best navigators Morrison had ever worked with. "What kind of readings?" Morrison asked, leaning forward in his chair. "Energy signatures. A lot of them. They're trying to stay hidden, but our new sensors are picking up thermal traces." Morrison felt his stomach tighten. The Kepler sector was supposed to be empty space, just gas clouds and dead rocks. No one should be out here, especially not in large numbers. "Pete, can you boost the sensors?" Morrison called to his chief engineer. "Pete." Collins looked up from his station at the back of the bridge. He was a big man with rough hands and grease under his fingernails. Pete could make any machine work better than it was supposed to. "Give me a minute, Captain. I can try to clean up the signal." Morrison watched Pete work. The engineer's fingers moved over his controls, adjusting power levels and filter settings. After a few minutes, Pete looked up with a worried expression. "Captain, you're not going to like this. I'm reading at least 800 ships out there, maybe more. They're all powered down, trying to stay invisible." The bridge went quiet. Amy Davis, the weapons officer, stopped checking her systems. Tony Hughes, who handled communications, turned in his chair to stare at the captain. Even Lisa stopped what she was doing to look back at Morrison. 800 ships? Morrison repeated, keeping his voice calm. Inside, his mind was racing. 800 ships meant a full battle fleet. No one put together that many warships unless they were planning something big. "Yes, sir. They're arranged in a classic ambush formation. Someone's been waiting out here for something to come along." Morrison stood up and walked to the main screen. The stars looked peaceful, but he knew that hundreds of enemy ships were hiding in the darkness. His ship had stumbled into a trap meant for someone else. "Lisa, can you identify the ships?" "Working on it, Captain." The energy signatures match Zephyrian design. These are Imperial fleet vessels. Morrison's blood ran cold. The Zephyrians were the most powerful military force in this part of the galaxy. They were tall, proud warriors who looked down on humans as primitive newcomers. Their ships were fast, heavily armed, and commanded by officers who had been fighting space battles for generations. "They're moving, Captain," Lisa said, her voice tight. "The whole fleet is powering up. They know we're here." On the main screen, points of light began to appear as the Zephyrian ships activated their engines. Morrison watched the tactical display as 800 red dots surrounded his single green marker. The Defiance was like a mouse surrounded by 800 cats. "Incoming transmission," Tony announced. "It's from the Zephyrian flagship." "Put it on screen." The main display changed to show a Zephyrian officer. He was tall and thin with pale blue skin and silver eyes. His uniform was covered in medals and rank insignia. When he spoke, his voice was cold and proud. "Human vessel, I am Fleet Admiral Korthvex of the Imperial Zephyrian Navy. You have wandered into a restricted military zone. Power down your engines and prepare to be boarded." Morrison stepped forward, his hands clasped behind his back. He had to buy time to think. "Admiral, this is Captain Jake Morrison of the exploration vessel USS Defiance. We were not aware this area was restricted. Our charts show empty space." Korthvex smiled, showing sharp white teeth. "Your charts are wrong, human. We have been waiting here for your supply convoy. 800 ships against 50 cargo vessels should be adequate, don't you think?" Morrison felt pieces of the puzzle clicking together in his mind. The Zephyrians were planning to attack a human supply convoy that was carrying critical materials to the outer colonies. They had set up this massive ambush to destroy the convoy and cripple human expansion in this sector. But the convoy wasn't coming. Morrison's ship had taken a different route than planned and stumbled into the trap by accident. The Zephyrians were expecting 50 cargo ships with light escorts. Instead, they had found one small exploration vessel. I see, Morrison said carefully. And if we surrender? Your ship will be destroyed as an example. Your crew will be imprisoned. The galaxy will learn what happens to humans who venture into Zephyrian space. Morrison looked around his bridge. Pete was watching the tactical display, probably calculating their chances of escape. Amy had her hand on the weapons controls, even though their small ship couldn't fight 800 warships. Lisa was plotting possible escape routes, though. Morrison could see from her expression that she wasn't finding any good options. Tony was monitoring Zephyrian communications, trying to gather intelligence. These were good people. They had signed up for exploration, not war. They deserved better than to die in a trap meant for other ships. Admiral, I need a few minutes to discuss terms with my crew, Morrison said. Korthvex laughed. You have no terms to discuss, human. You will surrender now or we will destroy you. 5 minutes, Admiral. Surely you can grant us that much time to accept the inevitable. The Zephyrian Admiral's silver eyes gleamed with amusement. Very well. 5 minutes. Do not attempt to run. There is nowhere to go. The transmission ended, and Morrison turned to face his crew. They were all looking at him, waiting for orders. Outside, 800 enemy warships were waiting to destroy them. Morrison had 5 minutes to find a way to save his ship and crew. 5 minutes to accomplish the impossible. But as he looked at the tactical display, an idea began to form in his mind. It was crazy, dangerous, and probably suicidal, but it might just work. Morrison walked quickly to Pete's engineering station. His engineer looked up with worried eyes, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool air on the bridge. Pete, I need you to start broadcasting on multiple frequencies. Make it look like encrypted communications, but I want the signals to appear random and scattered. Pete frowned. Captain, that will light us up like a Christmas tree. Every Zephyrian ship will detect our transmissions. That's exactly what I want, Morrison said quietly. Can you make the signals look like we're trying to contact other ships? Understanding dawned in Pete's eyes. You want them to think we're not alone out here? Exactly. How long will it take? Give me 3 minutes. I can use our communication array and some of the sensor equipment to create multiple transmission points. Morrison nodded and moved to Lisa's navigation station. Lisa, I need you to plot a series of course corrections. Make them look like we're trying to find an escape route, but I want each maneuver to put us in a slightly better tactical position. Lisa's fingers flew across her controls. Captain, there is no good tactical position against 800 ships. Trust me. Just make the movements look desperate but calculated. Like we know something they don't. Amy Davis turned from her weapons station. Captain, our guns won't even scratch their shields. What are you planning? Morrison looked at his weapons officer. Amy was tough, smart, and had never backed down from a fight. She deserved to know what he was thinking. Amy, forget about our main weapons for now. Remember those experimental modifications you've been working on? The ones you said might be useful for electronic warfare? Amy's eyes lit up. The sensor scramblers. Captain, those are just prototypes. They're designed to confuse navigation systems, not fight battles. Perfect. Get them ready. Tony, I need you to open a channel to the Zephyrian flagship, but keep monitoring their internal communications. I want to know what they're saying to each other. Tony Hughes nodded, his hands already working over his communication controls. Captain, their security is pretty tight, but I might be able to pick up some chatter. Morrison returned to his command chair and sat down. Around him, his crew worked frantically to prepare for what seemed like an impossible task. The main screen still showed the tactical display with 800 red dots surrounding their single green marker. Time, Lisa. 2 minutes until the Admiral's deadline, Captain. Morrison took a deep breath. Everything depended on the next few minutes. He had studied Zephyrian military history and psychology for years, preparing for the day when humans might face them in battle. Now all that knowledge would be put to the test. Pete, are those transmissions ready? Broadcasting now, Captain. It looks like we're trying to contact at least 12 different sources. The signals are encrypted, but not so heavily that it seems suspicious. Good. Lisa, execute the first course correction. The Defiance turned and accelerated, moving toward what appeared to be a gap in the Zephyrian formation. But Morrison wasn't trying to escape. He was positioning his ship where it would create the maximum psychological impact. Tony, open the channel. Admiral Korthvex appeared on the main screen again. Behind him, Morrison could see other Zephyrian officers watching the conversation. Their silver eyes were cold, but Morrison thought he detected a hint of curiosity. Your time is up, human. Are you ready to surrender? Morrison stood up and walked closer to the screen. He kept his voice calm and confident. Admiral, I've been reviewing the situation. Before we discuss surrender, I think there are some things you should know. What things? Korthvex asked, his tone showing he was getting impatient. Well, for starters, you've been waiting here for 3 days. That suggests you have very good intelligence about human shipping schedules. Someone told you exactly when our convoy would pass through this area. The Admiral's expression didn't change, but Morrison saw several of the officers behind him exchange glances. Morrison was right, and they knew it. We have our sources, Korthvex said carefully. I'm sure you do. But here's what's interesting, Admiral. The convoy you're waiting for took a different route. They left the Titan station 2 days early and went through the Ross sector instead. Now Morrison had their attention. Korthvex leaned forward slightly, his silver eyes narrowing. You're lying, Morrison smiled. Am I? Tony, show the Admiral the shipping manifest from Titan Station. Tony's fingers danced over his controls. False. Information appeared on the screen, carefully crafted to look like an official human document. It showed convoy routes, departure times, and cargo manifests. Most importantly, it showed that the convoy had indeed taken a different path. This could be fabricated, Korthvex said, but his voice sounded less certain. It could be, but ask yourself this, Admiral. How did I know you've been waiting here for 3 days? How did I know you were expecting a convoy? Your ships were powered down and hidden when we arrived. Morrison saw doubt creeping into the Zephyrian commander's eyes. Behind Korthvex, the other officers were whispering to each other. Morrison pressed his advantage. The truth is, Admiral, we've known about your ambush for over a week. My ship isn't lost. We're not here by accident. We're here because we were sent. Sent by whom? Korthvex demanded. Morrison paused, letting the tension build. By someone who knows your fleet positions, your communication codes, and your battle plans. Someone who wanted us to find you here. That's impossible. Our security is perfect. Morrison laughed softly. Is it? Then explain how I know that your third battle group has engine problems, or that your flagship's shields are operating at only 85% efficiency, or that you've been having trouble with your long-range communications for the past 6 hours. Korthvex's face went pale. Everything Morrison had said was true, but it should have been impossible for a human to know these details. The Admiral turned to one of his officers and spoke in rapid Zephyrian. Tony was listening carefully, trying to understand their conversation. Captain, Tony whispered, they're checking their systems. You were right about their shield efficiency and communications problems. Morrison nodded slightly. He had made educated guesses based on his knowledge of Zephyrian technology and tactics. The fact that he was right about some details would make them believe he might be right about everything else. Admiral, Morrison continued, I think we need to discuss what happens next. Because in about 20 minutes you're going to have much bigger problems than one human exploration ship. Morrison could see the uncertainty in Admiral Korthvex's silver eyes. The Zephyrian commander was trying to decide if the human captain was bluffing or telling the truth. Morrison knew he had to push harder before the Admiral figured out what was really happening. Admiral, let me share something else with you. Operation Wildfire. Korthvex straightened in his chair. What did you say? Operation Wildfire. That's what we call this mission. You see, your ambush was never really a secret. We've been watching your fleet movements for weeks. We know about your supply problems, your personnel issues, even your battle plans. Morrison turned slightly and nodded to Tony. His communications officer understood and began feeding him information through his earpiece. Tony was monitoring Zephyrian transmissions and could tell Morrison what the enemy ships were saying to each other. Right now, your ships are running diagnostics because you're worried about security breaches. Your communication officers are checking their encryption codes. Your tactical officers are reviewing their battle formations, looking for the weaknesses I mentioned. Korthvex's face grew paler. Behind him, Morrison could see Zephyrian officers working frantically at their controls. Everything Morrison said was happening exactly as he described. "How are you doing this?" the Admiral demanded. Morrison smiled coldly. "Admiral, humans have been studying your people for a long time. We know how you think, how you fight, how you make decisions. Your formation right now is called the Kethmore Crushing Circle. It's designed to prevent enemy ships from escaping while maximizing your firepower advantage." The Admiral's eyes widened. The Kethmore formation was a classified Zephyrian military tactic. No human should know that name. "But here's the problem with the Kethmore formation," Morrison continued. "It has 3 critical weaknesses. First, your command ships are too centralized. Take out the flagship and the outer rings lose coordination. Second, your heavy cruisers in the middle ring can't fire on targets directly above or below the formation without hitting your own ships. And third, if an enemy can create electromagnetic interference in the right frequency range, your tactical computers will start giving conflicting orders to different sections of the fleet." Korthvex was staring at Morrison with something close to fear. Every weakness the human had mentioned was real. These were secrets that only the highest-ranking Zephyrian officers should know. "Impossible," the Admiral whispered. "Those tactical weaknesses are classified at the highest levels." "Are they?" Morrison asked. "Tony, show the Admiral the intelligence files." More false documents appeared on the screen. They looked like official Zephyrian military reports, complete with security markings and command signatures. The documents detailed fleet movements, tactical assessments, and battle plans. They were fake, but they looked completely authentic. "These documents were stolen from our systems," Korthvex said, but his voice shook slightly. "Were they? Or were they given to us by someone who wanted us to have them? Someone inside your own command structure who's tired of this war?" Morrison was making it all up, but he could see the doubt spreading through the Zephyrian officers behind their admiral. In any large military organization, there were always rumors of spies and traitors. Morrison was simply feeding into their existing paranoia. "Admiral, check your fleet status right now. I think you'll find some interesting developments." Korthvex turned to speak with his officers. Morrison couldn't understand their language, but Tony was listening carefully and translating key words through the earpiece. "Captain," Tony whispered, "several of their ships are reporting sensor malfunctions. Pete's electronic warfare packages are starting to work." Morrison nodded slightly. Amy had activated the experimental sensor scramblers, and they were creating false readings throughout the Zephyrian fleet. Ships were detecting phantom contacts that didn't exist. Navigation systems were showing conflicting position data. Communication networks were experiencing mysterious interference. "Admiral," Morrison said loudly, getting Korthvex's attention again, "I can see your officers are finding problems with your systems. That's Phase 1 of Operation Wildfire. Electronic warfare designed to disrupt your command and control capabilities." "You're doing this somehow," the Admiral accused. "Of course, we are. But the question is how? Are we using some new human technology? Or are we getting help from inside your own fleet?" Morrison could see the paranoia spreading. Zephyrian officers were looking at each other with suspicion. Any unexplained system failure could be sabotage. Any communication problem could be evidence of a spy. "Let me tell you about Phase 2, Admiral. In 18 minutes, that's when the real operation begins. You see, this entire sector has been mined. Not with regular explosives, but with something much more sophisticated. Quantum mines that are invisible to your sensors until they activate." Morrison was lying completely, but he said it with such confidence that even his own crew almost believed him. Lisa looked up from her navigation station with surprise, then quickly turned back to her controls when she realized what Morrison was doing. "There are no mines here," Korthvex said, but he sounded less certain than before. "Are you sure? Your sensors are already malfunctioning. How would you detect quantum mines that are designed to remain invisible until activation? And even if you could detect them, How would you know which sensor readings are real and which ones are false contacts created by your system failures? The Admiral turned to his tactical officer and spoke rapidly in Zephyrian. Morrison couldn't understand the words, but the body language was clear. They were arguing about something, probably whether to trust their sensor readings. Admiral, I'm going to give you some free advice. Your formation is compromised. Your systems are failing. Your security has been breached. And in 16 minutes, those mines are going to activate. You have two choices. You can stay here and find out if I'm telling the truth, or you can withdraw your fleet to a safe distance and reassess the situation. You expect me to retreat from one human ship? Morrison looked directly into the Admiral's silver eyes. I expect you to make the smart tactical decision. You came here to destroy a convoy and send a message to humanity. The convoy isn't coming. Your ambush has failed. Your fleet is experiencing system failures that could be sabotage. And you're facing a human operation that you clearly don't fully understand. Morrison paused, letting his words sink in. Around the bridge of his own ship, his crew watched in amazement as their captain faced down 800 enemy warships, with nothing but words and bluff. Admiral, you have 15 minutes to make your decision. Stay and risk your entire fleet, or withdraw and preserve your forces for a battle you can actually win. I know which choice a smart commander would make. The transmission ended as Korthvex cut the communication. Morrison sat back in his command chair, his heart pounding. Everything now depended on whether the Zephyrian Admiral would call his bluff or decide that the risk was too great. Morrison watched the tactical display as the Zephyrian fleet held its position. For 3 long minutes, nothing happened. Then Tony spoke up from his communication station. Captain, I'm picking up increased chatter between their ships. They're running full system diagnostics on the entire fleet. What are they finding? Morrison asked quietly. Sensor malfunctions on at least 50 ships. Communication problems throughout their formation. And they're starting to detect phantom contacts that match the profile of cloaked vessels. Morrison smiled grimly. Amy's electronic warfare packages were working better than expected. The false sensor readings were spreading confusion through the enemy fleet like a virus. Lisa, execute the next maneuver. Make it look like we're coordinating with invisible allies. The Defiance turned and moved to a new position, following what appeared to be a complex tactical pattern. To the Zephyrians, it looked like Morrison was moving his ship to support other human vessels that they couldn't detect. Pete, increase the power to those false transmission sources. I want them to think we're in constant communication with a larger fleet. Pete nodded and adjusted his controls. The Defiance began broadcasting dozens of encrypted signals in all directions. To anyone monitoring the communications, it looked like a major military operation was taking place. Tony suddenly looked up with excitement. Captain, several of their outer ships are reporting contact with unknown vessels. They're demanding identification from targets that don't exist. Morrison felt a surge of hope. The psychological pressure was working. When people are already nervous and their equipment is malfunctioning, they start seeing threats everywhere. Amy, can you create some false targeting locks? Make it look like invisible ships are preparing to attack? Amy's fingers flew over her controls. I can use our sensor array to paint several of their ships with targeting radiation. It will look like they're being locked onto by weapons systems. Do it! Within seconds, alarm signals began sounding throughout the Zephyrian fleet. Morrison could hear the panic in Tony's voice as he translated the enemy communications. Captain, 12 of their ships are reporting missile lock warnings. They're going to combat alert status. The tactical display began to change as Zephyrian ships moved out of their perfect formation. Some turned to face threats that didn't exist. Others powered up their shields and weapons. The disciplined ambush formation started to break apart as individual commanders reacted to what they thought were enemy attacks. Sir, Lisa said, watching her navigation display, their formation is collapsing. Ships are moving independently, instead of following fleet commands. Morrison stood up and walked to the main screen. This was the critical moment. If the Zephyrians figured out what was really happening, 800 ships would turn their guns on the Defiance and end the deception instantly. Tony, open a channel to all ships in the Zephyrian fleet. All ships, Captain. That's going to be a wide broadcast. That's exactly what I want. Patch me through to every vessel out there. Tony worked his controls, and Morrison found himself speaking to 800 enemy warships at once. Attention, Zephyrian Fleet. This is Captain Jake Morrison of the USS Defiance. I am speaking to all ships because your fleet communications are compromised and your commanders cannot coordinate effectively. Morrison could see the chaos spreading through the enemy formation. Ships were turning in different directions, weapons were powering up randomly, and the disciplined fleet was becoming a confused mob. Your sensors are detecting multiple human vessels because they are there. Your targeting systems are being painted because invisible ships are preparing to fire. Your communications are failing because we are jamming them selectively. This is what modern human warfare looks like. Morrison paused, letting his words sink in. He needed to sound confident, in control, and slightly sympathetic to their situation. I know this is confusing for you. Your military doctrine is based on honorable combat between visible opponents. But humans fight differently. We use stealth, deception, and technologies you don't fully understand. Right now, you are surrounded by forces you cannot see and cannot fight using traditional methods. Several Zephyrian ships opened fire at empty space, trying to hit the phantom vessels their sensors were detecting. Their energy beams lit up the darkness but found no targets. Other ships began demanding orders from their flagship, but the communication jamming made coordination nearly impossible. Your Admiral Korth Vex is trying to maintain control, but his command structure is breaking down. Individual ship commanders are making independent decisions based on incomplete information. This is exactly what we planned for. Morrison was making it all up, but everything he said matched what was actually happening. The Zephyrian fleet was indeed losing coordination, their sensors were malfunctioning, and their commanders were growing more confused by the minute. Some of you are probably wondering why we revealed ourselves before attacking. The answer is simple. We want to give you a chance to withdraw with honor. Admiral Korth Vex set a trap for human cargo ships. That was a legitimate military operation, but you have stumbled into a much larger human operation that you were not prepared for. Morrison walked closer to the camera, looking directly at the thousands of Zephyrian officers who were watching him. In 9 minutes, Phase 2 of Operation Wildfire begins. Those quantum mines I mentioned will activate in a pattern designed to destroy your fleet formation while leaving escape routes open, but only if you begin withdrawing immediately. If you stay in formation, trying to fight invisible enemies, those escape routes will close. The tactical display showed the Zephyrian fleet in complete disarray. Some ships were moving toward the edges of the formation. Others were turning to attack phantom targets. A few were trying to re-establish communication with the flagship. None of them knew what was real and what was deception. I am going to give you one final piece of information, Morrison continued. Check your long-range sensors. You will find human reinforcements approaching this position. 3 battle groups with full stealth capabilities. They will arrive in 23 minutes. Admiral Korth Vex has that long to decide whether he wants to face them with a confused, disorganized fleet, or whether he wants to withdraw to a position where he can reorganize and fight effectively. Morrison nodded to Tony, who cut the transmission. The bridge of the Defiance was completely silent. Everyone was staring at their captain, hardly believing what they had just witnessed. Captain? Pete said quietly. There are no human reinforcements coming. There are no quantum mines. We don't have stealth ships. Morrison sat back down in his command chair, his hands shaking slightly from the adrenaline. I know, Pete, but they don't know that. And right now, Admiral Korth Vex has to decide whether to risk his entire fleet on the chance that I'm lying. Morrison sat in his command chair, watching the tactical display as chaos spread through the Zephyrian fleet. Ships were moving in different directions, firing at empty space, and demanding orders that never came. The perfect ambush formation had become a confused mess of warships that couldn't coordinate with each other. Captain, Tony said urgently, Admiral Korth Vex is trying to regain control of his fleet. He's broadcasting orders on emergency frequencies. What's he saying? He's telling his commanders to ignore the sensor malfunctions and return to formation, but a lot of ships aren't responding. Their communication systems are too scrambled. Morrison knew this was the critical moment. If Korthvex managed to restore order to his fleet, they would quickly realize that one small human ship had been fooling them. 800 guns would turn toward the Defiance and Morrison's bluff would be over. Open a direct channel to the flagship. Just Admiral Korthvex. The main screen showed the Zephyrian commander's face. His silver eyes were filled with anger and frustration. Behind him, Morrison could see officers running between control stations trying to manage the crisis. "Human Captain, what have you done to my fleet?" Morrison kept his voice calm and confident. "Admiral, I've shown you what happens when you underestimate human capabilities. Your fleet is experiencing exactly what I told you would happen. System failures, sensor malfunctions, and the beginning of Phase 2. There is no Phase 2. You're one ship with no weapons that can harm us." Morrison smiled coldly. "Am I?" "Admiral, look at your tactical display. Your fleet is scattered across 50,000 kilometers of space. Your ships are firing randomly at targets they can't identify. Your communication network is failing. Your sensors show enemy contacts that your weapons can't hit. Does this look like the result of one harmless exploration ship?" Korthvex turned to look at his displays, and Morrison could see the doubt returning to his eyes. Everything Morrison described was actually happening. "This is some kind of human trick," the Admiral said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Of course it's a trick, Admiral. It's called superior tactics. We studied your people, learned your weaknesses, and planned accordingly. The question now is whether you're smart enough to recognize when you've been outmaneuvered." Morrison stood up and walked closer to the screen. "Admiral, you're a military officer with a distinguished career. You didn't rise to command 800 ships by being stupid. So let me ask you a simple question. If this situation continues for another 10 minutes, what condition will your fleet be in?" Korthvex looked around his bridge at the chaos surrounding him. Officers were shouting reports about system failures, phantom contacts, and ships that weren't responding to orders. The flagship's own sensors were showing conflicting information about enemy positions. "My fleet will be combat ineffective," the Admiral admitted quietly. "Exactly. And when those human reinforcements I mentioned arrive in 18 minutes, they'll find your ships scattered, confused, and unable to coordinate their defense. Is that how you want the Zephyrian Imperial Navy to be remembered? Defeated by superior human strategy?" Morrison could see the Admiral thinking, weighing his options. Korthvex was a proud warrior, but he was also a professional soldier who understood tactics and strategy. "But if you withdraw now," Morrison continued, "you preserve your fleet and maintain your honor. You encountered an unexpected human operation that was larger and more sophisticated than your intelligence indicated. Any competent military commander would reassess the situation before committing to battle." The key word was honor. Morrison knew that Zephyrian culture valued tactical wisdom as much as courage. A smart withdrawal was more honorable than a foolish last stand. "You're offering me a way out," Korthvex said slowly. "I'm offering you the truth, Admiral. This operation was designed to neutralize your ambush without destroying your fleet. We could have activated those quantum mines immediately and crippled hundreds of your ships. Instead, we're giving you a chance to withdraw and fight another day." Morrison was still lying about the mines, but his tone was so sincere that even he almost believed it. The key was to make withdrawal seem like the smart choice rather than cowardice. Korthvex turned to speak with his officers. Morrison couldn't understand their language, but he could see the heated discussion taking place. Some officers were pointing at the tactical displays, others were gesturing toward the communication stations. The debate went on for several minutes. Finally, the Admiral turned back to face Morrison. "Captain, if I order a withdrawal, what guarantee do I have that your hidden ships won't attack us as we leave?" "You have my word as a starship captain, Admiral. If your fleet begins an orderly withdrawal, there will be no attacks on your ships. This operation was designed to protect the supply route, not start a war." Morrison held his breath. Everything depended on whether Korthvex would accept the offer or decide to call the bluff. The Admiral stared at Morrison for a long moment, his silver eyes searching the human's face for any sign of deception. Morrison met his gaze steadily, projecting confidence he didn't entirely feel. Very well, Captain Morrison. You have won this engagement. I am ordering my fleet to withdraw to a safe distance. Morrison felt his knees go weak with relief, but he kept his expression neutral. A wise decision, Admiral. Your fleet will be allowed to withdraw without interference. Korth Vex's image disappeared from the screen. Almost immediately, Tony started, translating the emergency broadcasts going out to all Zephyrian ships. Captain, the Admiral is ordering a full fleet withdrawal. All ships are to pull back to minimum safe distance and maintain defensive formation. On the tactical display, the 800 red dots began moving away from the Defiance's position. The massive fleet that had seemed so threatening just an hour ago was retreating from a single human exploration ship. Lisa, set course for home. Best possible speed. Aye, Captain. Course laid in. As the Defiance turned away from the withdrawing Zephyrian fleet, Morrison's crew began to realize what they had just accomplished. Pete was the first to speak. Captain, we just made 800 enemy warships retreat, without firing a shot. Morrison sat back in his command chair, finally allowing himself to smile. That's right, Pete. We did. How? Amy asked. How did you know it would work? Morrison looked around at his crew, these brave people who had trusted him with their lives. Because humans don't think like other species. We use our minds as weapons. We turn our enemies' strengths against them. And most importantly, we never give up, even when the odds seem impossible. The Defiance jumped to faster than light speed, leaving the Kepler sector behind. In a few hours, they would be home, with an incredible story to tell. Morrison picked up his communication device and began composing his report to Human Command. Mission accomplished. Supply route secure. Enemy fleet neutralized without casualties. Proof that sometimes the best weapon is the one between your ears.